Hey everybody, it's Mr. Williams. Today we're going to look at a reading. We looked at the reading already about the New England and Middle colonies. We're going to look at this one that gives a good overview about the Southern colonies. So we have a good overview of what the three regions kind of represent. Okay. So we're going to look at the first part here, and I'm going to kind of go over this together because a farming region, we're talking about the Southern colony, that required many laborers. The Southern colonies depended on slavery. And we've already talked about the fact that the Southern colonies primarily depended on a wide variety of labor force, including indigenous people, indentured servants, and African slaves. Okay, so we've kind of talked about all three of those already. Okay, geography of the Southern colonies. In the 1760s, Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon drew the boundaries known as the Mason-Dixon line. It became the line between non-slave northern states and southern states where slavery continued. Now, this is a little bit later in terms of when we talk about the Mason-Dixon line, but it is kind of a separator in terms of what's considered to be north and south. Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia were south of the line. They shared the Tidewater, a coastal lowland with many swamps. The warm, humid climate provided a long growing season for tobacco and rice. And we know those, those two right there are the big colonial resources that we've talked about, tobacco and rice being big. Both crops required many field workers, which helped spread slavery. And we're talking about it after we've discussed the fact that indigenous people and indentured servants are not going to be considered a long-term solution for labor, okay? This is what we talked about last week. Virginia grows. After the 1650s, Virginia's population grew quickly from 10,000 in 1640 to 40,000 in 1670. And part of the reason people are going to Virginia is because of Jamestown and the fact that the tobacco crop was flourishing there. Due to disease and violence, the Native American population shrank. Tobacco farmers took Native American land, causing two conflicts in 1622 and 1644. Hundreds of colonists were killed, but Native Americans were defeated and had to accept English rule. In the 1660s, wealthy Virginia tobacco farmers bought good land near the coast. Poor colonists could neither buy land nor vote. The reason why is because you had to be able to prove that you owned land to be able to vote. That was one of the requirements early on. Those who moved inland to farm fought with Native Americans. The governor of Virginia did not intervene, hoping to avoid war with Native Americans. And so what happened is you had the best farmland was near the coast. And if you couldn't afford that farmland, you were pushed farther inland away from the ocean. And so you had more conflict with natives who had been driven away from the good land of the coast as well. In 1675, Nathaniel Bacon led 1,000 farmers, frontier settlers, in attacks on Native Americans. The governor declared Bacon and his men rebels. Bacon burned Jamestown, which was then the capital, forcing the governor to flee. Bacon's rebellion ended when Bacon became ill and died. The governor hanged 23 of his men, but he could not stop settlers from moving inland. And so what happens is you're going to have an ongoing concern about tension between Native Americans and settlers who are trying to find more land and expand west. And that's going to be common for a long time. Religious toleration in Maryland. And toleration means acceptance, okay? In 1632, George Calvert set up a colony in Maryland where Catholics could live free of discrimination. Because in England, Catholicism was not accepted because the Church of England was at that time Protestant. So there's two denominations of Christianity. When he died, his son Cecil Calvert, or also known as Lord Baltimore, became owner. Because of tension between Protestants and Catholics, Lord Baltimore supported the Act of Toleration in 1649. It welcomed all Christians and gave adult male Christians the right to vote and hold office. And so we have a somewhat similar situation like we did in the last reading with Massachusetts, where we see religion playing a major role in the development of a colony. Colonies in the Carolinas and Georgia. Carolina was founded in 1663. The northern part developed slowly because it lacked harbors and rivers for ships. Settlers lived on small farms. They produced tobacco and lumber. The southern part grew quickly. Colonists used slave labor to grow sugar and rice. Carolina became two colonies, North and South Carolina. Georgia was founded for two reasons. The English feared that Spain was expanding northward from Florida. And remember, Florida is now a Spanish colony. Also, wealthy Englishmen led by James Oglethorpe wanted a colony that would protect debtors or people who owed money from imprisonment. He banned slavery, but by the 1750s, it was legal. So, okay, so let's talk about this for a minute. If you owed a large amount of money to the king in England, to avoid having to be thrown in jail, you were going to go to Georgia to work off your debt on the land, okay? And because Georgia is the southernmost at the bottom of the 13 colony, it was just kind of there as a buffer because they didn't want Spain to try to get, curious and push their boundaries to the north and try to expand further and kind of have some conflict with the English, okay? And the interesting thing about Georgia is that there was no slavery allowed. And it's part of the reason why Georgia had a very low population is because slavery was illegal. You could not bring slave labor into the colonies, and it was not allowed to be practiced there until the 1750s, okay? In the 1700s, the Southern colonies developed two different ways of life. Plantations, or large farms, dominated the economy of the Tidewater region. Tobacco and rice promoted the spread of slavery. The plantation system divided wealthy landowners from poor people who lived in the backcountry. The backcountry was cut off from the coast by poor roads. So if you lived farther inland, it really became a situation where you were more of a subsistence farmer, which means you grew crops only for your own use because you really didn't have easy access to the coast because that's where the ships came in. You have port cities like Charleston, South Carolina, Savannah, Georgia. Those were big for that. So there was a big variety of the types of farmers you would see in the South, primarily based on if you had a plantation or not, okay? And so that's the overview for the Southern colonies. And again, just like last time, I want you to answer the questions that are not marked out like this one. Answer all the questions, including in the margin, that are not marked out, and make sure that you submit that, and the submission is in the assignment, okay? Talk to you soon. Take care.